Imagine one careless sentence, tossed out with a smirk, bringing an entire courtroom to a halt and rewriting the fate of the person who dared to say it. The morning in Providence Municipal Court begins like any other. Low conversations drift through the room, mixed with the faint rustle of jackets still damp from the drizzle outside. Wooden benches give small, tired creaks as people settle in. Locals who've seen this place more than once, tourists who never expected to end their vacation here, and a few who simply look worn down by life. Near the bench, the clerk flips through case files with the steady whisper of paper sliding against paper. A few folks glance toward Judge Caprio, who sits with that familiar calm, voice warm, yet unmistakably in command. The next name echoes across the room. Leonard Marston. Heads turn. A tall man steps through the aisle, moving not with arrogance exactly, but with the practiced ease of someone who's used to walking into rooms where decisions are made for him, not about him. His coat is tailored, his cufflinks subtle but unmistakably expensive. And outside, parked illegally for the third time that month, sits his Bentley Bentayga, the car everyone now knows is his. The contrast hits immediately. Most people here are worried about a $30 ticket. He looks as though he's deciding where to dock his yacht next weekend. Caprio begins the routine. Mr. Marston, you are charged with exceeding the parking limit on 3 separate occasions downtown. Do you understand the charges? Marston tilts his head, almost amused. A faint smile pulls at the corner of his mouth, one of those tight, knowing smiles that never reaches the eyes. Then, just loud enough for half the courtroom to hear. I'm the god here. I'll decide what makes sense. The effect is instantaneous. A hush sweeps across the benches. A woman in the third row inhales sharply. Someone whispers, "He didn't just say that." An older man leans forward, jaw set, as if the remark personally offended every principle he's lived by. Caprio raises his eyes. Slowly, deliberately. Not angry, disappointed, perhaps, but alert now. Entirely alert. Would you like to repeat that for the record? He asks, voice level. Marston doesn't blink. The officer misread the situation. Let's not pretend this is important. The arrogance rolls off him like cologne, thick, unmistakable. But the courtroom isn't with him. Not today. From the back, an elderly man mutters, "I saw him that day." Barely audible, but enough to nudge the tension higher. Then another ripple of realization moves through the spectators. Marston isn't just rich. He personally funded part of the city's automated parking upgrade, the very system that caught him. He broke rules he helped design. A detail that now hangs in the air like a loaded question. Caprio leans slightly forward, hands folded. "Mr. Marston," he says quietly, "we'll see today just how much sense your version of the world makes." The room stills. The confidence, the wealth, the Bentley outside, none of it shields him now. A small crack has appeared in the surface of his perfectly controlled image. And everyone feels it. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Caprio studies Marston for a long moment before speaking. The judge's voice is calm, steady, almost too gentle for a man who has just declared himself God in a courtroom. "Mr. Marston, tell me a little about yourself. It helps me understand the context." The request is familiar to the regulars. This is the part where most people soften. But Marston doesn't soften, he stiffens. Why? He replies, almost dismissively, "My biography is on Google. Isn't that enough?" A ripple of disapproval passes through the room. Caprio doesn't react. He simply folds his hands and answers. "What I need to understand isn't on Google." For the first time, Marston exhales, short, sharp, irritated. He knows the script here, but he refuses to play it. Still, something in Caprio's tone presses him. Reluctantly, he begins. "My father poured concrete for 30 years, he says, voice clipped. 3 shifts, sometimes. My mother worked a cash register. We lived in a neighborhood where the power went out every storm, and the only thing politicians fixed was their own campaign posters." His posture stays rigid, but there's a small fracture in his delivery, an edge of memory he didn't intend to show. "I watched them struggle," he continues. "Watch them get stepped on. Watch people in suits make promises they forgot by morning." The courtroom grows quieter. Some older spectators exchange glances. This part is familiar to them. But the empathy barely has time to surface before Marston tears it away. "And that," he says, voice hardening, is exactly why I chose to rise above all of it. In this country, you either make the rules or you get crushed by them. I decided to stop being the one who gets crushed. A few listeners shift uncomfortably. Whatever sympathy was forming now dissolves into something more complicated. Caprio tilts his head. So you built your fortune on that mindset? Marston gives a short laugh, dry, almost metallic. My first deals were in the 90s. Tough years. People lost money, yes. Legally. They signed the papers. I played by the book. But did you play fairly? Caprio asks. Fair. Marston repeats the word like it's foreign. Fair doesn't exist. Only outcomes. The judge lets that sit. No reaction. No judgment. Just silence. Deep enough for the spectators to feel its weight. A woman in the front row folds her arms tightly. A retired teacher shakes his head, whispering, That's the problem. That right there. Caprio leans forward slightly. You mentioned earlier you weren't supposed to be in the city on the day of the violation. Marston hesitates, just briefly. It's the first sign of something unsaid, something he'd rather keep buried. I had a meeting, he replies too quickly. A private matter. Doesn't concern this. Caprio notes the shift. A small change in cadence. A protective wall sliding into place. The judge keeps his tone neutral. Everything concerns this if it helps us understand your conduct. Marston's jaw tightens. He slips back into cold certainty. I'm here because a parking sensor malfunctioned and a rookie officer didn't know what he was doing. That's it. But the courtroom doesn't believe him. Not anymore. They've seen something behind the armor now. Poverty that hardened into ambition, ambition that calcified into entitlement. A story that could have gone noble but veered into something else. Caprio sits back. Thank you, Mr. Marston, he says quietly. I believe we're starting to understand exactly how we got here. A different kind of silence follows. Not shock this time, but expectation. Because everyone senses it, the truth he's hiding is larger than a parking violation. And the judge is about to find it. Caprio's eyes narrow just a fraction as he flips through the documents in front of him. Something in Marston's answers doesn't add up. The tone, the timing, the deflection. Mr. Marston, the judge begins. Where were you between 2:10 and 3:40 p.m. on the day these violations were issued? Marston maintains his polished composure. At a meeting. I've already said that. Caprio doesn't respond immediately. Before he can press further, someone in the back rises hesitantly. A woman in a simple cardigan, clearly not accustomed to public attention. Your Honor, I'm sorry to interrupt. Her voice trembles, but she continues. He wasn't at any meeting. He was on Elmwood Avenue. In my neighborhood. Marston's head snaps toward her, sharp as a blade. It's the first time his mask truly cracks. Caprio gestures gently. Ma'am, please step forward. She approaches, clutching her purse. People in the gallery lean in. The room, moments ago restless, is now silent. She says, I remember because the ambulance had been called for an elderly man on the block. The paramedics couldn't get through. His car, she glances at Marston, was blocking the only exit. They had to wheel the stretcher 3 houses down. He was struggling to breathe. A breathless murmur sweeps across the courtroom. Marston's voice turns sharp. That's ridiculous. I was parked for minutes, at most. But the woman doesn't retreat. No. You were there long enough that one of the paramedics knocked on your window. You didn't even look up. Someone whispers, I believe her. Caprio holds up a hand, restoring order. Mr. Marston, he says calmly. Is this true? No. Marston fires back quickly, too quickly. She's exaggerating. People love drama. But his tone betrays him. A flicker of irritation, then alarm. He's losing control of the narrative, and he knows it. Caprio glances at the case file again. Something catches his eye. Officer Perez wrote that your violations were temporarily held for 72 hours. That's unusual. Do you know why that would happen? Marston stiffens. I have no idea. Ask your department. The judge doesn't challenge him directly, but the room can feel the shift. A hint of impropriety. A sense that someone intervened. Then Caprio lays another piece of the puzzle on the table. Mr. Marston, the timestamps on these parking photographs don't match your claim. According to these records, your vehicle was stationary for nearly 90 minutes. A gasp rolls across the benches. Marston's composure splinters for a beat, an involuntary tightening around his eyes, a shallow inhale. He quickly regains posture, but it's too late. Everyone saw the fracture. The woman adds softly. The paramedics were angry, Your Honor, but they said there was no point filing anything. The city listens to money, one of them said. Several older spectators shift uncomfortably. The sentence lands with the weight of experience. Caprio leans back, folding his glasses. His voice is even, but unmistakably firm. Mr. Marston, did you use your influence to delay or suppress any part of this citation? Marston freezes. No smirk. No retort. Just a stillness that speaks louder than denial. The gallery feels it too, the subtle shift from arrogance to fear. Caprio does not push further. Not yet. Instead, he closes the file gently and says, There are patterns here I cannot ignore. And if they point where I think they do, we are dealing with far more than a parking violation. The room settles into a tense, electric quiet. Everyone understands. The truth is beginning to surface. And it is much darker than anyone expected. Caprio studies the papers in front of him, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly. When he finally speaks, his voice is steady, but the words land with weight. Mr. Marston, something doesn't align. You said you were at a meeting, yet your vehicle was parked in a district where there are no offices, only homes. A ripple moves through the room. Marston's jaw tightens. It's the smallest reaction, but for a man built from steel and control, it's seismic. Caprio doesn't raise his voice. I'd like to call a witness who can clarify the timeline. The doors open, and a uniformed paramedic steps inside, broad-shouldered, calm, the kind of man who has seen too much to be impressed by wealth. He stands by the bench and speaks plainly. Your Honor, on the day in question, we were responding to a cardiac emergency. We lost critical minutes because a Bentley blocked our exit. The driver was nowhere around. We knocked, tried the loudspeaker, nothing. The gallery falls completely still. Even the air seems to hesitate. Marston shifts in his seat, eyes flicking toward the witness with something between irritation and fear. I wasn't gone long. You're dramatizing this. The paramedic doesn't react to the jab. He simply adds, 3 minutes can determine whether someone sees another sunrise. The silence that follows feels heavier than accusation. Caprio folds his hands. Mr. Marston, why were you truly in that neighborhood? You've given us one explanation, and the evidence gives another. For the first time, Marston's polished veneer fractures. He inhales, a shallow, unsteady breath. I wasn't at a meeting, he mutters. I was at a clinic. A private appointment. Someone in the gallery whispers, so that's it. Caprio's tone softens, but carries far deeper penetration than any harshness. Are you struggling with a medical condition, sir? Marston's eyes drop, not in humility, but in something closer to resignation. He doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. The truth is already sitting in the room with him. The judge allows the silence to settle. Older spectators shift on the benches, their faces carrying a lifetime of moments when pride outweighed honesty. The woman who'd testified earlier speaks again, gently. I saw you leaving that building. You looked unwell. I thought you might faint. Her voice isn't accusatory now. It holds concern. That contrast hits the room harder than any confrontation. Marston's shoulders sag, not dramatically, but with a quiet surrender. The unshakable man who claimed divinity minutes ago now looks unmistakably human. Caprio leans forward, elbows resting lightly on the bench. Mr. Marston, if you had said this at the beginning, the conversation today might have been very different. But lies have a way of closing the doors that honesty could have opened. The gallery absorbs those words like a collective breath. Marston finally looks up, and for a fleeting moment, the arrogance is gone. In its place, something raw, unguarded. Caprio continues, voice steady but resonant. This is no longer about a parking violation. This is about a man running from something he cannot outspend or outmaneuver. The judge's gaze stays fixed on Marston, not unkind, but unwavering. And today, Mr. Marston, the running stops. The clerk dims the lights slightly and loads the footage on the screen. A soft hum fills the courtroom as the monitor flickers to life. People lean forward instinctively, as if bracing for something they already sense will change the direction of the case. The timestamps appear first. Then the Bentley glides into view, too fast for a residential street. It stops abruptly, tires jerking. The car is wedged beneath a bold red sign. No stopping anytime. Marston steps out, not with the swagger he displayed in the courtroom, but bent slightly, one hand pressed to his ribs. His face is tight, eyes unfocused. He doesn't look like a man who owns half the city. He looks mortal. He walks toward the clinic side entrance, almost stumbling. No valet. No aide. Just a human being trying not to collapse in front of strangers. A whisper cuts through the room. Good Lord. Caprio doesn't respond. His attention is fixed on the screen, reading the images like a physician reads a scan. The timeline progresses. At 2:26 p.m., the ambulance appears. Its rear doors slam. Paramedics work quickly, sliding someone inside. The siren isn't on. They are stabilizing first. At 2:27, the driver climbs in, activates the lights, and tries to move forward. The Bentley blocks everything. The driver gets out and knocks, first softly, then louder. He circles the car, checks the window, even tries the horn to alert any passerby who might know the owner. No one comes. A woman in the gallery steadies herself with a hand on the bench. The older man beside her mutters, 3 minutes. That's a lifetime for a heart. Then comes the moment that sucks all the air out of the room. At 2:31, Marston emerges again. He's holding the edge of the wall, breathing sharply. He sees the ambulance. He sees the struggle. He sees the lights. And he turns away. Not hurriedly. Not guiltily. Just avoids it. As if the responsibility is too heavy to acknowledge. A muted groan sweeps across the gallery. Caprio raises a hand slightly, not to silence them, but to steady the room. The footage freezes on Marston's back as he walks away. Mr. Marston, Caprio says quietly, do you wish to add anything before we proceed? Marston's voice is coarse. I didn't think they needed me. I didn't think. A new figure steps forward. The doctor from the clinic. White coat, subdued demeanor, eyes carrying the fatigue of someone who sees life's fragility daily. He addresses the judge, but glances at Marston as if speaking to an old wound. Your Honor, Mr. Marston had just received alarming test results. I urged him to stay for observation. He refused. He said he had business obligations that couldn't wait. A few listeners exchange knowing looks. Business over body, an old American story. But, the doctor adds, I don't believe he was trying to be cruel. He was afraid. Marston flinches, as if the word itself strikes deeper than any accusation. Caprio turns to him, voice low but firm. Fear doesn't excuse harm, but it explains why you ran. The paramedic nods slowly, acknowledging the complexity even in the wrongdoing. From the front row, the woman who had spoken earlier rises again. Her tone is soft this time. I saw him that day. He looked lost. Not arrogant, just drowning. The gallery shifts. The narrative is no longer rich man versus rules. It is a man cornered by something he cannot control. Caprio interlaces his fingers, leaning forward. Mr. Marston, the problem is not that you were afraid. The problem is that you hid behind bravado instead of truth. And in doing so, you jeopardized someone else's fight for life. He pauses, letting the weight settle. Everything we've heard today, your pain, your fear, your pride, matters. But so do the consequences. Marston doesn't lift his head. His breathing is uneven, like someone bracing for impact. Caprio continues. This courtroom must see the full picture before I render judgment. And now, I believe we finally do. He taps the stack of documents, parking logs, medical notes, statements, timelines. You were not a monster that day, but you were not responsible either. You stood at a crossroads and chose denial. Marston closes his eyes, jaw trembling despite his effort to hide it. The judge's tone softens, just enough to be human without losing authority. This case is no longer about a car, or a curb, or a sign. He glances at the frozen image on the screen. It is about what a person does when truth demands courage and finds none. He lets the screen fade to black. And with the room holding its breath, Caprio says the last line of the part. Measured, steady, almost compassionate. Now we move from what happened to what must happen. The courtroom remains still. No gavel, no noise, just the weight of truth in the air. Judge Caprio glanced down at his notes, then back at Leonard Marston, whose hands were now clasped, not in defiance, but in silence. Mr. Marston, Caprio began, voice calm, but deliberate. Earlier you said, you were God here. Marston didn't flinch this time. He nodded slowly. I did, he said, because I panicked. I've lived my life with everything under control, markets, people, outcomes. I thought if I couldn't manage something, it didn't matter. But this. He touched his chest briefly. This diagnosis, it broke the illusion. I didn't know how to be weak. The admission landed not like a confession, but a fracture finally allowed to surface. In the silence, no one moved. Caprio inhaled deeply. We punish lies to uphold truth. But sometimes, we punish to remind people they're still part of something larger than themselves. He lifted a single paper from his bench. You'll pay a $3,500 fine. Additionally, you'll contribute $1,500 to Providence EMS, whose time you compromised that day. Marston nodded. And lastly, Caprio added, you will serve 40 hours volunteering at the city's cardiac rehabilitation center. There was a pause. The tension didn't break. It shifted. Not because I want to humble you, the judge continued, but because I believe some lessons only reach us when we stand beside those we once ignored. Marston blinked hard, but didn't look away. I'll do it, he said. And, if she allows, he turned slightly toward the woman who'd spoken earlier. I'd like to speak with you after. I owe you a real apology. She gave a faint nod, nothing more. Caprio tapped the bench once. This court is adjourned. But the crowd didn't stir. No applause. No shuffle of papers. Just stillness. Caprio stood, his robe shifting slightly with the motion. Law isn't about control, he said, looking not at Marston, but at the room. It's about accountability. About how we show up for each other when no one is watching. Only then did people begin to rise, quietly, with the kind of respect that doesn't need ceremony. As Marston walked out, a step slower, a boy in the back row whispered to his mother, he doesn't look like a rich guy anymore. She replied softly, he looks like someone trying to start over. And for once, no one had anything to add.